I used to believe nightmares were just dreams, exaggerated by a kid's imagination, nothing more than shadows that disappeared with the morning sun. But for me, nightmares were not just fleeting images. They were heavy, suffocating, and so real that I would wake up screaming every night, drenched in sweat, heart racing as if I had just escaped something that wanted me dead. My parents thought it was just a phase. They said I would grow out of it, that kids always dream about monsters and ghosts. But my nightmares never went away. They followed me through childhood, into my teenage years, and by the time I was in college, they were still there. Every night, without fail, I saw the same things. A faceless figure standing at the foot of my bed. Long fingers reaching for me. A deep voice whispering words I could never fully remember when I woke up. It was torture. Sleep wasn't rest for me, it was war. I was exhausted all the time. My grades suffered. I pushed people away. I avoided relationships, because how could I ever explain that every night? I lived inside a horror movie that didn't end when the credits rolled. My parents were desperate to help. We tried everything, sleep aids, therapy, even some alternative healing. Sessions that felt more like scams. Then actual treatment. Nothing worked. Until one day my mother stumbled across an article online about a sleep specialist. His name was Dr. Harrington. The article called him a pioneer in dream therapy, someone who had redefined the way the medical community viewed nightmares. He had helped veterans, trauma survivors, even people who were completely unable to sleep for years. His method, the article claimed, wasn't about medication. It was about going directly into the subconscious mind and rewriting the memory pathways that triggered fear. It sounded like something out of science fiction, too good to be true. But we were desperate. I was desperate. So I agreed to meet him. The first time I saw Dr. Harrington, he didn't look like what I expected. I imagined an old eccentric professor, type with messy hair and glasses. Instead, he was tall, well-dressed, maybe in his early 50s, with perfectly combed gray hair and eyes that were so calm they made you feel safe. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper, like he was always careful not to disturb anyone around him. He made me feel like he already understood me, even before I explained everything. He nodded through my story, and when I finished, he smiled. "I can help you," he said, so confidently as if there was no doubt. "But you must trust me completely." I didn't even hesitate. Of course I trusted him. I had no choice. My life was falling apart because of these nightmares. If he was my last hope, I was willing to try anything. The therapy was nothing like I expected. I thought I would just talk while lying on a couch, or maybe go through hypnosis like in movies. But Dr. Harrington had a small private clinic, and the room where the therapy happened looked more like a laboratory than a doctor's office. The walls were lined with strange machines, wires, and screens showing colorful patterns that pulsed like heartbeats. He had me sit in a reclining chair and placed a thin band across my forehead. It felt cold, almost metallic, and when he turned on the machine, I felt a low vibration deep in my skull. "Don't be afraid," he said, still in that soft voice. "This is just opening the door. I'll guide you from here." And then I was somewhere else. It's hard to describe. I was awake, but I wasn't. My body was in the chair, but my mind was in a dark space, floating, weightless. I saw flashes of my nightmares, the faceless figure, the whispers, the hands reaching for me. But this time, Dr. Harrington was there too. I don't know how, but he appeared inside my dream, calm and steady like an anchor. He told me to focus on his voice, to imagine locking the figure away. I did as he said, and slowly, piece by piece, the nightmare began to crumble. The figure disappeared into the darkness. The whispers faded, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the chair, the band removed, and Dr. Harrington smiled. "How do you feel?" he asked. I couldn't even answer. I just cried, because I felt free. The days after that session were like living a new life. I slept through the night, No nightmares, no fear. I woke up rested, something I hadn't experienced since I was a child. I thought it was a miracle. I told my parents, my friends, everyone who had seen me struggle. They were shocked by how different I looked. Alive, happy, even hopeful. Dr. Harrington became a hero to me. I visited him once a week for follow-up sessions, and every time he reminded me that this was a process, that I had to continue until my mind was fully healed. I didn't even question it. I trusted him completely. He had given me something priceless, sleep without terror, peace of mind. But then I noticed something strange. The nightmares were gone, yes. But sometimes when I closed my eyes, even just for a nap, I would hear faint footsteps. Not in the dream, but outside of it, like someone pacing at the edge of my bed. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe my brain was just trying to adjust after years of trauma. But the footsteps grew louder. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sure that someone was in my room. I'd turn on the light and nothing was there. Still, I told myself it was fine. After all, what were footsteps compared to the horrors I used to face every night? I convinced myself it was nothing. Just side effects. Just my brain being weird. And yet, there was something in the way. Dr. Harrington looked at me during those follow-up sessions. His smile, once comforting, started to feel different. Too wide, too satisfied. Like he was proud of something I didn't understand. I brushed it off. I wanted so badly to believe he had saved me. I couldn't admit the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't cured me at all. That maybe he had done something else entirely. At the time, I didn't know. I couldn't have known. But looking back now, I realized something terrifying. The nightmares didn't just vanish. They had been taken, pulled out of me. And what happens to a nightmare when it leaves your mind? Where does it go? That was the question I should have asked. But I didn't. I was too blinded by relief, too desperate to sleep like a normal person. If only I had seen the warning signs earlier, maybe I would have understood what Dr. Harrington was really doing. Maybe I would have run, but I didn't. And by the time I realized the truth, it was already too late. At first, I kept telling myself that everything was fine, that the faint footsteps I thought I heard at night were nothing more than my brain adjusting to a life without nightmares. After years of constant fear, maybe silence itself felt unnatural. That's what I wanted to believe. But soon the things I brushed off as harmless details began to grow louder, stronger and harder to ignore. I remember the first night I realized something was truly wrong. I had just fallen asleep, only a few hours into what should have been another dreamless rest, when I woke up suddenly without knowing why. The room was dark but not silent. I heard breathing, slow, steady breathing. It wasn't mine. It came from the corner of my room, where shadows pooled thickest. My heart raced as I turned on the lamp beside my bed. Of course, the corner was empty, but the air still felt heavy, like someone had just been standing there. I didn't sleep again that night. The following evenings brought more of the same. Sometimes it was footsteps circling the room. Other times it was the sound of fingers dragging slowly along the wall. At first it happened only in the dark, but then I started noticing things during the day. Walking down the hall at school, I would feel a presence directly behind me, so close that I could almost feel breath on my neck. But when I spun around, the hall was empty. In the reflection of store windows, I swore I saw something tall and dark following me a few paces back. Just a silhouette, no face. I wanted to believe it was just stress, hallucinations maybe, side effects from whatever strange therapy Dr. Harrington had done to my subconscious. But deep down I knew better. My nightmares hadn't disappeared. They had shifted. They had stepped out of my dreams and begun leaking into my waking life. I told Dr. Harrington about it during one of the follow-up sessions. I sat there, nervous and pale, explaining how I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, how I heard footsteps and breathing in my room when I was alone. I thought he would reassure me, maybe adjust the therapy, explain it as a common reaction. Instead, he just smiled in that same calm way and said, That's perfectly normal. It means the treatment is working. I remember staring at him, confused. Because how could constant fear and paranoia be a sign of progress? But he leaned closer and spoke, so softly I almost didn't catch it. You must let the process finish. Don't resist. Trust me. There was something in the way he said it that made my skin crawl, but I nodded anyway, because what else could I do? He was the expert, and I was the broken one. Still, the encounters escalated. One night I woke to find mud smeared across my bedroom floor. Wet footprints trailed from the open window, straight to the side of my bed, stopping just inches from where I slept. I screamed for my parents. When they rushed in and turned on the light, the footprints were gone. The floor was clean, as if nothing had ever been there. They looked at me with worried eyes, whispering to each other that maybe I was having some kind of breakdown. But I knew what I saw. I could still smell the damp earth. I could still feel the cold air of something having just been in my room. After that, I stopped trying to convince anyone else. I realized no one could see what I saw. No one else could hear what I heard. This thing was mine alone. The faceless figure from my childhood nightmares was no longer just a dream. I began seeing it clearly, standing in the corners of dark rooms, sometimes reflected in mirrors or glass, always still, always silent, except for the low hiss of breath. It was tall, impossibly thin, its head tilting ever so slightly when I noticed it, like it was studying me. The worst part was that I couldn't move when I saw it. My body locked in place, frozen with terror, until eventually I blinked and it was gone. But the fear didn't leave. It lingered, thick and suffocating, long after the figure disappeared. I tried to tell myself it was sleep paralysis, something I had read about online, where people imagine terrifying things while half asleep. But that explanation fell apart the night I saw it during the day. I was sitting in class, the sun bright through the windows, when I glanced toward the door, and there it was, peering in, faceless head leaning against the glass. I screamed. Everyone stared at me, confused, because to them the door was empty. I couldn't explain. How could I? My visits to Dr. Harrington became less comforting and more terrifying. Each time I described the figure, he seemed almost pleased. He would ask me specific questions, like how tall was it this time? How close did it get? Did it ever try to touch me? His eyes lit up in a way that didn't feel like concern but fascination, like a scientist studying his experiment. I began to dread those appointments, but I kept going because some part of me thought maybe, just maybe, he could still make it stop. That hope kept me tethered, even as my sanity unraveled. Then came the night that removed all doubt. I woke up to the sound of my closet door creaking open. Slowly, painfully slow. I sat up, staring into the darkness, heart hammering, and then it stepped out. The same faceless figure, taller than the closet itself, its shoulders scraping the frame, head bent to fit through. Its body moved wrong, jerky, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. It stood there, breathing, and though it had no eyes, I knew it was looking directly at me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only watch as it leaned closer, closer, until its featureless face hovered inches from mine. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it dissolved into the shadows, leaving me shaking and drenched in sweat. The next morning, I noticed something on my pillow. Dirt. Real gritty dirt. Proof that it wasn't just in my head. I went back to Dr. Harrington, desperate for answers, and confronted him. What's happening to me? Why is it getting worse? I demanded. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, he smiled that same unsettling smile and said, because the nightmare has finally separated from you. It's no longer trapped in your subconscious. It's free now. I froze, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Free? What did that even mean? He leaned back in his chair, almost satisfied, and added, you should be proud. You've accomplished what no other patient has. You've given it form. His words made me sick. I realized in that moment that he hadn't cured me. He had used me. The therapy wasn't about healing. It was about creating. He had pulled the nightmare out of my head and into the real world, and now it was mine to deal with. That night I couldn't sleep at all. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like it was about to stretch into something tall and faceless. I locked my door, my windows, even shoved a chair under the handle. But at 3 a.m. I woke to knocking, slow, deliberate knocks on my bedroom door. My parents were asleep down the hall. I knew it wasn't them. The knocks grew louder, shaking the wood until finally they stopped. I held my breath, waiting, and then heard it. That same slow, steady breathing right behind the door. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I lay there until the sun came up, too afraid to move. From that point on, I understood the truth. My nightmare was real now. It walked where I walked, lingered where I slept, breathed where I lived. And worst of all, it wasn't going away. Dr. Harrington had released it. He had given it to me. And I had no idea how to take it back, or if that was even possible. After the night it knocked on my door, I realized there was no turning back. Whatever had been inside my mind was now loose, and I couldn't escape it no matter how hard I tried. The days that followed were worse than any nightmare I'd ever had. At least in dreams, I could eventually wake up. But now waking up meant stepping into another kind of horror. I started noticing it everywhere, not just in my room. Walking home from class, I'd glance down an alley and see the tall shadow waiting at the end. Riding the bus, I'd catch its reflection in the window, even though no one was sitting beside me. At the library, I'd look between the shelves and catch the faint curve of its faceless head peering through the gaps. The worst part was that no one else noticed. People walked right past it, brushed shoulders with the air it occupied, completely unaware. It was like the thing existed only for me, tethered to me, following me. And I knew why. Dr. Harrington had said it himself. It had separated. It had form. But it wasn't just free. It was mine. I stopped going to my follow-up appointments. I couldn't stand the thought of sitting across from him again, watching that smug satisfaction in his eyes, as if this was all some kind of accomplishment. But avoiding him didn't change anything. The figure didn't fade. If anything, it grew bolder. Instead of just watching, it started interacting with my space. Objects moved around my room at night. My chair shifted from one side of the desk to the other. Books I hadn't touched in months fell open on the floor. Once I woke to find all the photographs in my room turned face down. Every single one. I told myself maybe I had done it in my sleep, but deep down I knew better. It wanted me to know it was there. Sleep became impossible again, but in a much worse way. It wasn't nightmares anymore. It was the constant knowledge that something stood just beyond my vision, waiting for me to blink, to let my guard down. I drank coffee until my hands shook, forced myself to stay awake for days, until exhaustion finally knocked me out. But even then I wasn't safe, because now when I closed my eyes I didn't dream. Instead I saw it standing over me, closer and closer, until its head tilted and I could feel the weight of its attention like a physical touch. One night I woke with scratches down my arm, shallow but real, my blood on the sheets. That was when I understood it wasn't content to just watch anymore. Desperation drove me back to the clinic. I didn't make an appointment. I just showed up one afternoon, stormed through the front doors, and demanded to see Harrington. The receptionist tried to calm me down, but when I shouted that it was about the therapy, that I wasn't safe, Harrington appeared himself. He looked almost delighted to see me. I remember yelling at him, asking what he had done to me, what this thing was. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he said words I'll never forget. "You asked me to take away your nightmares. I did. I freed you. But you never asked me what would happen to them once they were gone." He leaned closer, his eyes shining with that twisted pride, and whispered, "They have to live somewhere." I froze. My whole body went cold. He had never intended to cure me. I wasn't a patient. I was a vessel, an experiment, and now the experiment was alive. I wanted to scream at him, to demand he fix it, to beg him to put it back where it came from. But before I could speak, he added, It won't leave you. It can't. It belongs to you now just as much as you belong to it. The calm certainty in his voice was worse than any threat, because I knew he was right. I felt it. The figure wasn't some random ghost or hallucination. It was me, my fear, my darkness, torn out of my head and given a body. And that bond couldn't be undone. I stumbled out of his office in shock, but before I left, I heard him call after me, his voice almost cheerful. Take care of it. Few people ever meet the monsters that haunt them. After that, things spiraled. I tried to ignore it, to pretend if I lived normally it would fade, but ignoring it only seemed to make it angrier. Lights flickered wherever I went. Electronics glitched out when I was near. I lost count of how many times I turned around and saw it standing there, closer than the time before. My friends noticed something was wrong too. They said I looked pale, sick, paranoid. I stopped going out at night, stopped answering texts. Eventually, I stopped leaving my house. But even there, I wasn't safe. One evening, while my parents were downstairs, I heard my bedroom door creak open slowly. I froze in bed, too scared to move, and then felt the mattress dip beside me, as if something heavy had sat down. I couldn't see it, but I didn't need to. The air turned ice cold, and that slow, steady breathing filled my ear. I cried silently, praying for it to stop, but it stayed there until morning. I became convinced that it was building towards something. Watching wasn't enough anymore. Sitting beside me wasn't enough. It wanted more. And I was terrified of what more meant. That's when I decided to dig deeper into Harrington's past. If he had done this to me, maybe he had done it to others. Maybe I wasn't the first. I searched online, through medical records, even old newspaper clippings. That's when I found them. Mentions of former patients, people who had vanished under mysterious circumstances, families who claimed their loved ones became unstable after therapy with him. A few had written online posts before disappearing, describing exactly what I was experiencing, shadows following them, faceless figures, strange noises. Reading their words was like staring into my own reflection. And then the posts just stopped. No explanations, no conclusions, just silence, as if they'd been swallowed whole. The realization hit me like a brick. None of them had survived this, and if I didn't find a way to stop it, neither would I. But how do you kill something that was born out of your own mind? How do you fight a nightmare that's become flesh? I didn't have answers. I only had fear, and that fear seemed to feed it. The more terrified I became, the stronger it grew, showing itself more boldly, standing closer, reaching further. The last night I ever tried to sleep normally was the worst. I locked my door, turned on every light, and lay in bed with my eyes wide open, determined not to close them. Hours passed, and then the lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs burned out until the room was swallowed in darkness. I heard the closet door creak open and then footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the room toward me. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. The air grew cold, and I felt long fingers press against my ankle, sliding slowly up my leg. I broke then. I screamed, kicked, thrashed, but there was nothing to fight against, only shadows. My parents rushed in, but by the time they got there, the room was normal. Lights back on, closet closed, me sobbing on the floor, clutching at my leg. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Now I don't even pretend I can escape it. I live with the knowledge that the thing is always here, always waiting, and sooner or later, it will take more than just my sleep. I don't see Dr. Harrington anymore. I don't need to. I know exactly what he did. He didn't cure me. He created something through me. He opened a door and pulled the monster out of my head, and now it walks in the real world. Every time I hear those slow knocks on my door at night, I know it's getting closer to whatever end it has planned. And maybe when that day comes, when it finally steps fully into the light, people will realize what Harrington has been doing all along. But until then, I'm alone with it. The doctor who cured my nightmares created the monster that now haunts them, and it will never let me go.